Okay, so let me ask you, maybe I'll ask you because we're going to run out of time. I want to ask you a final question, then you can maybe help me in my aim. I've been trying to understand the Christian doctrine of the word and its relationship to the Jewish prophetic tradition for a long time. And I know that Christ is a central figure in Islam as well. I mean, the Christians make the claim that Christ is the Son of God, right? He's the Messiah himself. And it's very difficult, if you're going to be a Christian, not to accept that claim. And I think I understand the claim in some sense psychologically. I think the notion that the free word, the free truthful word is the fundamental redeeming force. I believe that's true. I think it's true literally, and I think it's true metaphorically, and I suspect it might be true religiously, although I'm not exactly sure what that means. And I think part of the stumbling block for me in relationship to Islam, I can understand Christianity in relationship to Judaism, but I can't understand Islam in relationship to Christ. Because I understand the Christian idea that Christ was what would you say, a transcendent consequence of the prophetic tradition, and the Christian insistence that his life is associated with the divinity of the word, and that is in some sense a final statement. And so I don't understand how Islam moves beyond that and still places Christ in a place of centrality.
Well, I mean, the Jews don't accept Christ at all. Like the best of the Jews will say he was a rabbi, but many of the rabbis considered him to be a charlatan, a magician. And Jesus in the Talmud, which was printed by Princeton University Press, makes that argument that the Talmudic views of Christ, which he argues in that book that it was understandable given that the Jews were so persecuted by the Christians. But the Muslim theology is I think it's a radical monotheism that even I think it transcends the monotheism of Judaism, which has some anthropomorphic elements in it that the Muslims would not accept. But generally, the Jews and the Christians agree on the theology. Rabbis, I've had many talks with rabbis, and they see Islam. In fact, Kohler says that Muslims were always seen as full proselytes of the Noahidic laws, whereas Christians were not because of the Trinity. So the Trinity is, the principle of the triad is, in Plato in the Timaeus talks about that. So the principle of the triad is a very powerful principle, and there are many, many trinities in the world that we see. So it is understandable.
I don't understand exactly why that constitutes such a stumbling block. I mean, and again, I'm trying to speak at least to some degree psychologically.
Well, if you read,
well,
sorry,
it seems to me that the idea of the Holy Ghost is allied with the idea of conscience. That voice that speaks from within, and then the idea of the Son element of the Trinity. That's the fact that divinity can reveal itself within a personality.
Well, I think,
and then the idea of God himself, the God the Father, that seems to me to be the idea that's most tightly associated with the Jewish idea of the absolute and the Islamic idea of Allah.
Well, I don't think so, because if you read Meister Eckhart or even Aquinas on Trinity, but Eckhart, the Godhead, is infinite, cannot be embodied, is simple. There's no parts. So I think if you get into deep Catholic theology, you'll find that in the end, it is a type of unity. So the personas, and they are called personas in Latin, means mask in Latin. Right. It's a mask, right? And so for Muslims, Christ is a central figure, and Muslims do believe in a second coming of Christ, born of the virgin birth, but Christ is not divine. Christ is human. And you'll find that in the dual nature, not in the monophysite or the diaphysite traditions of Christianity that you find like in Coptic Christianity and some of the monophysites that believed in that Christ was purely divine, but in this idea that Christ is of a dual nature. So the Logos inheres, and that's a mystery. But this idea, Catholics never call, like evangelicals, they don't call on Christ as, when they pray, they call on God, the Father, through an intercession of Christ, which is, I think, very different from worshiping Christ as the Godhead. Because I think it becomes very confusing even for a lot of Christians.
I think it is confusing, and the fact that it is one of the stumbling blocks to something approximating a union of the great Abrahamic traditions is quite a problem. And
well, we can agree on a lot of things. I mean, we certainly
yes.
we agree that there is a God, that he created us. We agree that the prophets were sent to warn people and to give them good news. And we agree that there's a day of judgment and people are going to be resurrected. I mean, those are some pretty strong things to base a sense of shared concern on. We certainly agree on family. We agree on the importance of raising children healthy. We all share the liberal arts tradition. Muslims, Christians, and Jews all share the tradition of the liberal arts, which is very important.
Maybe we could start in our efforts to move forward by concentrating on those things that unite us.